Hi guys, so today we're going to workshop a first species counterpoint, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of steps that should make the composition process a little bit faster and a little bit more foolproof. So there are two different stages to the composition practice of first species counterpoint that will be helpful. One is the preparation stage and one is the check your work stage. In between is the composition part, and with good preparation and good checking of your work, good post composition practice, you should end up catching a lot of mistakes that you might have otherwise let go by and having a nice, beautiful line at the end. So we're going to take a cantus and I'm going to just kind of step by step walk you through both the preparation, the composition, and the post composition checking phase to give you an idea of a good practical way of composing these slightly longer compositions. What you have in front of you is a longer cantus, so about the length of the one that we workshopped in class on Wednesday. So we are going to walk through the process for composing a first species line above this. So the first preparatory piece I want you to think about is the cadence. It might seem a little weird working from the end first, but when we talked about the rules for first species counterpoint, there is a hard and fast rule about the cadence, and that is that one voice will go from scale degree 2 to scale degree 1, and the other voice will go from scale degree 7 to scale degree 1. So these are immutable. You have to have that particular cadence. So let's go ahead and draw it in now. So if you look at your cantus, we're in F minor, and your cantus in the last two measures is going from G to F, or scale degree 2 to scale degree 1. So that tells you by power of elimination that your counterpoint must do the other cadential formula, which is going from 7 to 1. So let's go ahead and draw that in. Now, two things to keep in mind. One is range. The widest range you can have between your voices is a 12th. So you have to make sure when you're choosing this scale degree 7 that you choose the one that is within a 12th of the cantus. In that case, it is this E here. Now we are in minor. So you absolutely have to also remember that what do we do to scale degree 7 in minor? In the cadence, we have to raise it. So in this case, that means putting a natural on that E, and then scale degree 7 will go to scale degree 1. Now, why did I have us start there? One is that it has to be that way anyways, so why not just sketch it in? The second thing is, the last thing you want is to get really invested in your counterpoint line and spend all this time building a really lovely line, and then you get to the measure before the cadence and you have something there that will not work with the cadential measures, something that will give you a poor melodic motion or a forbidden interval of some sort. So you don't want to get to that second to last measure and all of a sudden have to work backwards and start kind of erasing everything that you've already worked for. So have the cadence there to start, because it will keep you focused on making sure you get to that E natural in a nice, smooth way. Okay, so that's preparatory piece number 1. Preparatory piece number 2 is to take some time, and it's slightly time consuming, to give yourself a bank of possible pitches for every measure. So going back to the rules for counterpoint, there are only certain vertical intervals we can have, right? So remembering back to that, we are allowed to have thirds. We're allowed to have perfect fifths, so you have to be careful with diminished fifths. You're allowed to have sixths. You're allowed to have octaves. And then by extension of that, since we can go up to the 12th, you can also have tenths and 12ths, again, as long as they're perfect. Yes, you can also have unisons, I would be careful with those though. Yes, you can use them, but it can be really easy to cross voices after you have a unison. So if you are going to utilize one, just be very, very careful that your voices do not then cross. Yes, you may use them, but be cautious with them. Okay, so now that we have that, what I'm going to do is take some time and sketch out all of the possible notes per measure. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at the very first measure. We have this F in the cantus. Measure 1 has to be either a unison, a perfect fifth, or an octave. So you don't have very many options, right? You've got to have one of those perfect intervals. So let's go ahead and draw in what those options might be then. So our unison, and again, we use these sparingly and we are careful, and I'll tell you in a second why a unison won't work here anyways. There's our fifth. There is our octave. So those are your 3 pitch options for the start. Why am I not thrilled with a unison? In this particular instance, you see your cantus moves up for its first motion over the bar. It moves upward. If you start on a unison, you are also going to have to move upward by a wider interval. It's really easy to make mistakes that way. So I would say stick with the fifth of the octave for the first measure. Now I'm going to go and continue sketching out those possible pitches for every single measure. And then when I finish up, I will have kind of a framework of what is possible for each measure so that I know my options going forward. Okay, so now we have all of our options sketched in there. Quick note and a reminder, the only time you have to raise scale degree 7 in your counterpoint is if it goes to 1. So we have the 7 in the cadence raised because it's going to 1. In your counterpoint, you can have a scale degree 7 that goes somewhere else, and in that instance, you do not need to touch it. Just leave it as the diatonic 7. All right, so now your job is to build a line from this particular bank of notes that you have created. You've got to choose your starting interval and starting pitch, and then you sort of just go from there. And this is, it could be a lot of trial and error for you, and that is totally fine. As you're going, you now no longer have to worry about vertical intervals. So now you can really focus on the melodic line, making sure that you don't have any melodic dissonances, which for what we're talking about right now, we have to worry about sevenths and we have to worry about augmented intervals. Remember that fourths are horizontal dissonances, but they are fine melodically. So you may move by a fourth. But now you've set yourself up to just have to worry about that. So you can take some time, play around with building a melody that is nice and singable, and you know it will work vertically with your cantus. So let's go ahead, and I am going to take a second, work out a line, and then we'll talk about what you can do after you've composed your counterpoint to check and make sure that you have got everything underway in terms of melodic and harmonic rules. So here we have it. I chose notes from the blue columns of notes that I filled out in my prep and formed a counterpoint line above the cantus. You can see that I have a distinct climax in my line. So my counterpoint has a melodic peak here, which is different from the melodic peak in the cantus, which is something that we look for. So now that we've done that, how do we go back and check our work? We know that the verticalities are fine now, right? Because we did that in our prep work. But just to be sure, and to also double check how we get to our perfect intervals, the first thing I'm going to have you do is go in and just write the intervals in between the lines, like we saw on the handout. Now, once you have that, I want you to go in and circle the perfect intervals. So any unisons, fifths, eighths, or if you do have them, twelfths, go ahead and circle those intervals. The reason I had you circle those intervals is so that you can make sure that you have gotten into any and all of those perfect intervals through contrary motion. So below the staff, I'm just going to sketch in the types of motion that we have going into the perfect intervals. The cadence, since we custom built it, we know is contrary motion. The only other perfect I have to worry about is the one in the very second measure. And if you look at the contours of the two lines, we have a contus going up, a counterpoint going down. So we reach that in contrary motion. So we're A-okay for all of our perfect intervals. The last thing you need to do is check your melodic line for any melodic dissonance. A great way to do that is just to sing it and check as you're singing. But another way is to go through and above the staff, just jot in each melodic interval. So F to E flat, we have a second. And notice that this is a diatonic scale degree 7 here with the E flat, right? So I did not raise a leading tone because it's not going back to 1. And then we have a fifth here. So now that I've got all those written in, I want to check for any sevenths, which are melodically forbidden, and then any fifths and fourths, so any fives and fours I have, I just want to double check that they are indeed perfect and not accidentally augmented or diminished. So you can see my fifth here checks out, it's E flat to B flat, that's fine. My melodic fourth, G to C, is okay. And then my fifth here is actually also G to C, so that is fine. All of my fourths and fifths melodically are perfect, so I am okay there as well. And that's it. There's your counterpoint. With your contus, you've got good vertical lines, you've got a nice melody, you're not breaking any horizontal or vertical rules, which is great. You remembered to raise the leading tone at the cadence, so you are all set. This will serve you really well as you start to do these compositions on your assignments. Having just that little bit of preparatory time will make it a lot easier on you as you go. And we'll continue to workshop these in class and as well as on your homework. All right, so I will see you guys on Monday.